A friend of mine cheated on his wife, and I told him outright. He ruined his kids' lives. Now, somehow, his wife has taken him back, and it's apparently because of what I said. My wife, however, thinks I accidentally guilt her into forgiving a cheater. She's upset with me because of a conversation I had with my, now ex, friend this past weekend. I need a neutral opinion on whether what I said was horrible or disrespectful to my wife. Just a heads up, this is a sensitive topic and might be triggering for some people. So, here's the background. I've been friends with Jason, 38M, since high school. Our families are close and our kids are about the same age. Jason is married and has 2 young daughters. Last month, his wife, Bree, received anonymous messages revealing that Jason had been cheating on her. She dug deeper and discovered he'd been having a 2-year-long affair with a coworker. Bree was devastated and reached out to my wife for support. Naturally, my wife and I stood by Bree. She confronted Jason and kicked him out of the house. Now, he's staying with his parents and supposedly trying to fix things. I decided to support Bree and the kids and cut ties with Jason. But Jason didn't stop reaching out. He kept messaging, wanting to talk. Last week, his mom called me. She said Jason wasn't doing well, having panic attacks, and begged me to talk to him. I was hesitant, but despite my wife's protests, I agreed. He came over Friday evening. My wife didn't want to see him, so she stayed in our bedroom with the kids. Jason was a mess, crying, apologizing, and saying he'd broken things off with the affair partner. He claimed he was even planning to quit his job and would do anything to get back with Bree and see his daughters. It was hard to see him like that, but then he started blaming Bree. He said she'd been ignoring him for years, and that's why he made this mistake. I lost it. I told him to stop blaming Bree. If he had problems with her, he should have worked on them with her, not gone behind her back. Cheating? That's the absolute worst thing he could have done to her, and he has no idea how much pain Bree is in because of all this. I told him flat out that he didn't just hurt Bree, he ruined his kids' lives. They didn't do anything wrong, yet now they're paying for his selfishness. I told him, Jason, husbands and wives may have problems, but your actions are punishing your kids. Their lives will never be the same because of you. I was furious. I told him I was angrier at him for destroying his daughters' lives than anything else. I even called him a monster for not thinking about them before cheating on his wife. We argued back and forth for a while, but in the end, I told him, I can't help you, Jason. I'm standing in Bree's corner. We're going to support her and the kids. They deserve better than this. After that, he left. My wife was glad that I didn't support Jason or let him shift the blame onto Bree for his horrible actions. But later that night, as we were getting ready for bed, she asked me something that caught me off guard. Why did you focus so much on the kids when you talked to Jason? She asked. What about Bree? Her life is destroyed too. She's not going to recover from this emotionally or financially for a very long time. I explained that, from my perspective, I feel worse for the kids because they had such a stable, happy home, and now Jason has completely wrecked it for everyone. But my wife wasn't satisfied with my answer. Then she said something that really stuck with me. If you were ever tempted to cheat, would you stop yourself because you love me? Or would it be because of the kids? We also have 2 daughters, so the question hit close to home. I told her honestly that I'd never cheat because I have morals, but if I were playing her hypothetical game, I'd stop myself because I'd never want our daughters to go through something so horrible. That upset her even more. She said she should be the number 1 reason why I'd never cheat, not the kids. I understand her point. I really do. I love her deeply, but at the same time, I want my daughters to grow up in a happy, stable home with 2 loving parents. For me, that would be the strongest motivator to never do something that could destroy their lives. Now I'm left wondering, am I wrong for prioritizing my daughter's happiness over my wife's feelings? Is this a normal way of thinking, or is my wife right? Should she always be my top priority? I can't help but blame myself for the mess that's unfolded so far. The issue started when my friend Jason was caught cheating on his wife last month. Last week, during a heated argument, I told him he should have thought about his kids before starting a 2-year-long affair with a coworker. My wife overheard that conversation, and she was upset, not because she disagreed with my anger, but because she felt that Bree, Jason's wife, was the one most wronged in this situation. My wife believed I shouldn't have made Jason's kids the central reason why he shouldn't have cheated. I agree with those of you who said my comments were out of line. It's been an emotional week, and I'm still not sure I'm processing everything clearly. The night I posted here, I had a very long conversation with my wife. I apologized to her for saying that our daughter's happiness would be my primary reason for never hurting our family. I told her she is the love of my life and that I deeply value everything she's done for us. I acknowledged that she is my wife and that I made a vow to her to stand by her forever. I also admitted that my statement had been hurtful to her, even if I didn't mean it that way. Thankfully, my wife was understanding. She told me not to worry about her and said she recognized how much I love our kids. She admitted that she was hurt in the moment, but knows my heart is in the right place. However, she did ask why I kept bringing up Jason's kids during our conversation. She said that was the part of my argument where I completely lost my cool. Here's why. When Bree kicked Jason out after learning about the affair, she was a wreck. Bree doesn't have a lot of close friends, and my wife happens to be one of her few confidants. Naturally, Bree called my wife to share what happened, and my wife immediately went to her side. While my wife stayed with Bree to support her through the breakdown, I volunteered to pick up Jason's daughters and bring them to our house to give Bree some space. I ended up watching their kids for 4 nights until Bree felt stable enough to care for them again. Jason's older daughter, who is about 6, seemed to have some understanding of what was going on. But his younger daughter, just 4 years old, didn't comprehend the full situation. All she knew was that she missed her parents, especially her dad. She's a daddy's girl and kept begging me to call Jason and ask him to come over. It broke my heart. Seeing her little face filled with confusion and longing was devastating. I couldn't help but think about how irreparably her life had been altered by Jason's selfish decisions. That's why, when I finally confronted Jason, I couldn't stop myself from focusing on the kids. Their suffering was just too overwhelming to ignore. But I understand now that Bree is the one who was most deeply hurt. She's been betrayed and left to pick up the pieces, both emotionally and financially. I know I need to reframe how I think and speak about these situations. Jason and Bree's relationship is ultimately their own, and I know I don't have a say in their decisions. But I think that's why I reacted so strongly. I couldn't help but feel for their kids. I'm lucky my wife understood my emotions and was gracious enough to support me, even though my comments weren't ideal. After our argument, my wife told Bree about Jason coming to our house and the fight I had with him. Bree was understandably hurt, but asked if she could come over on Friday to talk to me directly. When we met, Bree asked me about my conversation with Jason. I was honest with her. I explained how Jason's mom had reached out to me, and I'd reluctantly agreed to meet with him. I told her what Jason said, how he'd broken things off with his affair partner, was planning to leave his job, and wanted to make things right. Bree also asked why I'd brought up the kids so much during my argument with Jason. Again, I was truthful. I admitted that I'd spoken in the heat of the moment and apologized for having strong opinions about their relationship. I told her I knew it wasn't my place, but my emotions got the better of me. Bree then asked my wife and me if we thought Jason could change. She said she was deeply worried about the kids and the impact this would have on them. She admitted Jason had always been an amazing dad and wasn't sure if she could raise the kids without him. My wife told her that while Jason's actions were horrible and unforgivable, we couldn't give her advice about their relationship. Only Bree could decide what to do. Bree told us she wanted to talk to Jason, but needed to feel safe while doing so. She asked if we could host both of them at our house. We agreed. On Sunday, Jason and Bree came over. It was the first time in a month that Jason saw his daughters. Watching the emotions on his face when he reunited with them was surreal. He was utterly broken, and the tears were overwhelming. Say what you will, but moments like that are why I know I'll never jeopardize my own family. I never want to be in Jason's shoes. Bree and Jason talked privately while the kids played with my wife and me. Later, I got the gist of their conversation. Jason apologized profusely to Bree, saying he'd do whatever it took to make things right. He told her he'd already submitted his 14-day notice at work to leave the environment where the affair began. He vowed never to speak to or see his affair partner again. He even promised Bree full access to his phone and said he wouldn't take any job that required him to travel or stay away overnight. All he asked was for a chance to go to marriage counseling and try to rebuild their life together. Jason proposed moving to a town near Bree's parents for a fresh start, but Bree wasn't comfortable with relocating. Ultimately, they agreed that Jason would move back into their house, and together, they would work on rebuilding their relationship. Both of them thanked my wife and me for mediating, and Jason apologized for the chaos. He promised to do everything he could to heal their marriage and ensure his daughters were well cared for. On the surface, this seemed like a positive outcome. But my wife pointed out something troubling. She believes my comments about their daughters might have guilted Bree into taking Jason back. This was never my intention. I didn't mean to interfere in their relationship. I just wanted to emphasize how deeply his actions impacted his kids. Now, I can't help but worry. If Jason cheats again, or if their reconciliation doesn't work, I fear that Bree might blame me for nudging her toward this decision. I tried to stay neutral and avoided giving direct advice, but my earlier remarks about the children might have unintentionally influenced her. Looking back, I realize I could have approached the situation differently. Instead of focusing on how their daughters might suffer, I should have reassured Bree that a truly great father will remain dedicated to his kids, whether or not he's in the same household. Divorce doesn't mean raising children alone, and staying in a marriage solely for the children's sake can sometimes lead to even more pain for everyone involved, including the kids. This situation has also made me reflect on my wife's earlier frustration with me. She was hurt when I said that our daughter's happiness would be the main reason I'd never cheat. She felt it minimized the importance of our relationship and the vows we made. I now see how my words might have unintentionally mirrored the same dynamic between Bree and Jason. I thought I knew Jason like a brother. I never imagined he was capable of this level of betrayal, and now I don't fully trust him. Despite his apologies, I remain skeptical about whether he can truly change. I'd like to hear your thoughts. Did I handle this situation appropriately? Could my comments about the kids have pressured Bree into taking Jason back? I feel conflicted, and I'm worried that I may have made things worse for everyone involved. I've been married to my wife for 3 years. I'm 27 and she's 26. My sister-in-law is 30 and her husband is 31. I've always been close to my sister-in-law, but my wife and her sister don't get along. They constantly fight and argue. 3 weeks ago, while having dinner with friends, I saw my brother-in-law with another woman. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then I saw him kiss her. I was shocked but didn't confront him at the time. When I got home, I told my wife what I saw and said we needed to tell her sister. My wife disagreed and said we should talk to my brother-in-law instead. She didn't want to break their marriage, especially since her sister is pregnant. I argued that her sister deserved to know the truth, but my wife told me to stay out of it. After thinking it through, I decided to tell my sister-in-law myself. She was devastated, but thanked me for telling her. She confronted her husband, and he admitted to the affair. She has since left him. My wife was furious that I went behind her back. She accused me of meddling and said I had no right to interfere. During one of our arguments, she said she would forgive me if I ever cheated to avoid embarrassment and complications. That comment made me question everything about our relationship. Things escalated, and my wife decided to leave me. Now my sister-in-law is staying with me as we both go through divorces. We've grown closer through this, but I can't help wondering if I made the right decision or if I caused more harm than good. I've been married to my wife for 3 years, and my sister-in-law, SL, is 30, while her husband, BIL, is 31. I've always had a strong bond with my SL, though my wife and her sister don't get along well. A few weeks ago, I saw my BIL with another woman at a restaurant. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then I saw him kiss her. Shocked, I decided to tell my wife, assuming we'd handle it together. Instead, she urged me to stay quiet and suggested we confront her brother-in-law instead of informing her sister. My wife argued that her sister is pregnant and breaking their marriage would cause unnecessary distress. I couldn't agree with her stance and felt morally obligated to tell my SL. Despite my wife's warnings that it would strain our relationship, I went to my SL's house and told her everything. At first, she was doubtful and asked me to leave. Later, she called me in tears, confirming what I said was true after confronting her husband. She decided to leave him but was worried about finances. I wired her some money to help her get through this difficult time. She appreciated the support and assured me she'd only use it if absolutely necessary. When my BIL found out, he called my wife, who lashed out at me, accusing me of ruining her sister's marriage and family. I tried to explain that doing the right thing mattered more than keeping quiet, but she refused to listen. She defended her BIL, saying her sister and her unborn child needed him, even though he had been unfaithful. During one of our arguments, I asked my wife if she would forgive me if I ever cheated on her. To my shock, she said yes. When I asked if she would hide it from me if she cheated, she also said yes. This completely shattered my perspective on our marriage. I told her if she wanted a divorce, she should go ahead, as I couldn't stay in a relationship where such values were upheld. My SL is currently separated from her husband, and while she's going through a lot, she's taking steps to rebuild her life. Meanwhile, my marriage feels like it's on the brink of collapse. My wife still blames me for interfering, and I can't help but feel conflicted. Did I do the right thing by prioritizing honesty and supporting my SIL, or have I inadvertently caused irreparable harm to my own marriage? After telling my wife I'd revealed the truth about her sister's husband, my BIL, cheating, my wife was furious. She didn't want me to intervene, despite me feeling morally compelled to tell my SL, who was pregnant and being lied to. My wife even seemed more concerned about her sister's relationship than the truth, arguing that telling my SL could negatively impact her pregnancy and create long-lasting trauma. My wife's anger escalated when I helped my SL financially, which she felt was a betrayal, especially since she and her sister had a strained relationship. Despite my insistence that I did the right thing by supporting my SL, my wife started packing her things, saying that she'd leave if I couldn't respect her wishes. She eventually left, and I couldn't convince her to stay. I tried reaching out to my wife and her family, but they didn't know where she was and began to blame me for not knowing. I also went to my BIL's house, trying to confirm my suspicions about where my wife might be, but it was fruitless. In frustration, I called my SL and offered her a place to stay, as I was going to my parents' house. My wife was gone, and no one knew where she was. Meanwhile, my SL stayed in our house, and I couldn't help but feel a mix of anger, betrayal, and confusion. The biggest blow for me was how my wife left without even trying to discuss things further. I didn't know if she had cheated or if she would have, but what I did know was that I couldn't trust her anymore. I felt hurt and abandoned. After revealing the truth to my SL about her husband's cheating, she initially stayed at my place for a couple of days, but then decided to leave and stay at a hotel. I tried to convince her not to spend unnecessary money, but she insisted. Meanwhile, my wife and I are now in the process of divorcing. A week after no contact, my wife reached out, wanting to reconcile. She said she was angry that I went behind her back to tell her sister the truth, but she was still trying to protect her sister's family by convincing my BIL to stop cheating. She told me she didn't want to break up the family. However, I couldn't trust her anymore because she had left me without explanation, and I was left in a state of uncertainty about her safety. I made it clear that I wanted a divorce. When I told her that my SL had stayed at our house, my wife got angry and left, confirming the end of our relationship. My SL was unhappy to hear about the divorce, but didn't try to change my mind. I offered her a place to stay instead of blowing her money on a hotel, but she hesitated, feeling uncomfortable about it. Eventually, she accepted my help. After living together for a few days, my SL became angrier than I was about the situation. She even called my wife, expressing her fury and telling her she was going to ruin my BIL's life by divorcing him and taking as much money and child support as possible. While my SL calmed down after this, realizing that it's not healthy for her or the baby to stay angry, she began focusing on her career and preparing for life as a single mother. Despite the tension between my wife and I, my SL and I are just living together as housemates, with no romantic feelings involved. I know that what I did was the right thing, not just for my SL, but for myself too. I now understand the type of woman my wife is and have made peace with the fact that we're heading toward divorce.